Welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Hello everyone, it's Jesse Green here. Welcome back to SavvyDentist.com and to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is great to have your company for another episode of our show. And today in this episode, I want to talk all about dental fit outs. And if you've ever done a fit out or you're contemplating a fit out, you'll appreciate and understand just how much work it takes to bring your design to life in the way that you intend it. It takes passion, it takes time, it takes skill, all of those things. And we know that building a dental practice is more than just walls and floors. It's about really creating a space that enriches the lives of the inhabitants, whether it's your team, your patients, or anyone else. And my guest today is Jerry Kennard, who is the owner of Evoke Projects. Now, Jerry and his team are regarded as the premier design and fit out company in Australia. And what I really appreciate in this conversation is how thoughtful they are about the psychology of the design. It's not just about lines on a page or angles here or anything else in between. It's about understanding who's going to use that space and creating it by design. So we do cover a lot in this episode. We talk about the psychology of design. We talk about who you're designing it for. We talk about some of the common mistakes that people make in their design process and their construction process, and really how to avoid those pitfalls. We talk a lot about the topic of time and budget, because budget is a thing that we all have to consider when we're building these things. So we talk about how to set the budget, how to stay on track, and how to make sure that the project is delivered on time. So there's a lot of things that we cover in this episode that are going to be really useful and really practical. And I'd encourage you, as always, to have a pen and paper handy, because there's some real pearls of wisdom here. So even if you're not designing a place right now, you'll get a lot of inspiration and insights about what you might want to do for your existing place. And so do have a pen and paper handy, because Jerry shares some absolute gems, some real pearls of wisdom that I know are going to be really important for you to understand and adopt in your own practice. So I hope you enjoy this podcast episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. So without any further ado, here's Jerry Kennard. Jerry Kennard, welcome to the Savvy Dentist podcast. It is fantastic to have you here on the show. Thanks so much for making the time, mate. How are you?
Good, thanks, Jesse. Fantastic to be here after all these attempts that we've sort of stumbled on and tried to make happen. We've finally got it together.
We're here. We got it. We made it. It's good. And I'm really grateful to you for making the time, mate. Now, Jerry, you run a company called Evoke Projects, and it is regarded as one of the, if not the leading fit-out company for medical and dental in the country. I've seen lots of your work. It's really beautiful, but it's also done with specific intent and design. And what I'd like to spend today talking about is the thought process behind the final product, because I can look at the final product and go, wow, that looks amazing, but I'd really love to understand the thinking, the psychology that sits behind that, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, dead right. There's so much behind it.
Yeah, I've got I love pretty things, and that's great, but I also love the strategy behind it. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about common mistakes to start with, because just to use that to set the scene, because you would have seen your share of things go wrong when you've been called in after the fact to fix things or whatever. Where do people go wrong?
I would say it's an interesting question. I think you could safely say that every design and fit out that as a practice owner that you take on or you do, and whether that be you only do one in your life or two or three or 10, whatever it is, I would say there's always going to be learnings as a result of each project that you participate in or you take on. From a design perspective, I mean, we're aiming to be best practice at everything we do. But to answer your question, I think there is a common thread that we see that I would say isn't given enough airtime or enough thought when it comes to the nitty-gritty of building the practice. And probably the top one that comes to mind would be the acoustics. It is very much about the budget and how we're going to build the practice to a budget. But I think one of the things that often gets shortchanged is stuff, and granted, you can't see it. You can't see a lot for your money because it's the composition of the walls, it's the composition of the ceilings and what's above the ceilings and the surfaces. You don't see a lot more for your money. So when you're comparing, you might get 2 prices, 3 prices, whatever it is for your fit out. If you don't understand what they're giving you in the petitioning and the acoustic qualities and ratings of the walls that they're giving you and the ceilings, etc., you could be doing yourself a big disfavour, and you won't know until you move in, and then you can hear everything next door, you can hear everything down the hallway, and then there is some superficial stuff you can do later, but the bulk of it is in the construction of the walls. And there's no ifs or buts around that.
Well, I have a lived experience with that, Jerry.
I thought you may have, because most practice owners have.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I didn't know you at the time we did our fit out. Otherwise, I would have been seeking your advice around that. But you're right, because it impacts on not just the patient experience, clearly, but also when you're working all day in that kind of environment where there's noise, it becomes distracting. Yep. And you're right, you can try and retrofit a few things, but retrofitting is never as good as designing from the get-go.
No. And, I think that's one of those things. Often the team will say, look, these are our recommendations. These are the things that you should do when you construct it. These are the things you can add later. So we're always mindful that cost is always a massive aspect to the whole process. When it comes to a design brief, budget plays such a big role. It's about allowing every practice owner to make educated decisions every step of the way, so that they can make a choice. They are in the driver's seat as to how much they want to spend, and you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So if someone just wants to sell you, get the order for the cheapest price, yes, you might think you've won, but when you just don't want to hit these hurdles once you've moved in, and it's too late. Yeah. And it's a very costly mistake to fix.
You're absolutely right. And I guess that leads me into the question of when is the right time to engage a company such as yours? Is it at the point where you're looking for premises? Is it at the point when you've secured the premises? What's the ideal if we're thinking about best practice?
Best practice? Yeah. I would say absolutely before you sign anything for your new premises. So often, we'll have a practice owner come to us and go, look, I've got this site, we're settling in on X date. And we go, our heart does starts palpitating because you go, well, we hope they've done the due diligence on car parking. Can they get approvals? And generally speaking, if they've worked through a buyer's agent or a leasing agent, I'll do a shout out now to Tal and Julian from One Group, someone like them, then they will have done the due diligence. So straight away, that's a question we ask, because we can then rest easy. Yeah. But if they haven't, with all due respect to leasing agents and real estate agents, the sign can say it's fit for medical use. It can say anything you like. They can say anything you like. But at the end of the day, council has the last word. And not just a discussion with council, because we've often had that come up where a client might say, I've talked to council, and they're going, yeah, it should be fine. Should be fine is an alarm bells, because a council will never put anything in writing. And at the end of the day, it comes down to what will actually go through with the town planner. Does it need a change of use, or can it be done under a CDC? And the car parking is such a vital factor when it comes to dental practices and having enough parking. Every council is different, so it's a completely different ballgame and that's where we can help with that. And it is something that if they're not willing to engage someone like Tal and Julian or their team to undergo a forensic investigation into what they can and can't do on that site, then we will do some high level and put them in touch with the town planner. But our first preference is they talk to the experts before they even start negotiating on a property. If they come and they've already done it and they go, this is what we've got, that's probably another big ticket item that you could end up in a pretty horrible situation where you've got a property that you potentially can't use.
Yeah, wow. And then the decision is, do you press ahead with the plans, or do you have to try and sell it and move on to the next thing?
Absolutely. And the point is that if you can't get use of it, approved use, you've got no other option but to sell it. You can't use it.
Yeah, wow.
Period.
Wow. That's expensive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So assuming we've got a great location, we've found the right premise, it ticks all the right boxes from an approval point of view, from a car parking point of view, and so on and so forth. What is it that you look for in a space where you go, we could do something good with this? What are those spaces? Is it regular shapes? What sort of square meterage? What sort of things do you, as a fit out company, look for and go, we've got some good clay to mold into something beautiful here.
Yeah, look, it's one of those things. Do we live in an ideal world?
No, I know, but still.
But if you're looking for the ideal situation, in answering your question, it probably goes back to give you a bit of background about how we work as a design company. We're very passionate about creating spaces that not only facilitate the process and the flow of your practice and production and everything, all the technical aspects of it, but as important, this is very debatable, obviously, subjective. More importantly, is the environmental or the emotional design aspect of the practice. We always talk about everyone's on an emotional journey, whether they work in your practice or whether they're a patient in your practice. You know, from the time they open your door, what is that journey? So there's things that, I don't know if you've heard of the WELL building standard. You may have heard me bang on about it before, but it's a framework that's come out of the States, but it's getting a bit of traction here in Australia. We're always a bit behind, obviously. It can be a certification for the practice or for the building. Yeah. I would say the overarching theme is that it's aimed at improving the well-being of the occupants of a building or a space. So if you think of that, they then dumb that down into 10 different concepts, you know, from air, water, nourishment, light, movement, thermal comfort, sound. We talked about acoustics, materials, mind and community. When our design team look at a practice or a workplace through that lens and how to design the ultimate space for the occupants and how to improve the well-being of the occupants, I would say when it comes to looking for a site, and this is a bit of a sticky one, because we look for natural light. If you had the ideal world, natural light to every consult surgery would be amazing. Yeah. And we get it a lot of the time, or, you know, a considerable amount of the time, we're putting dental practices in shopping centres and there is no natural light. Yeah. And you got to work with what you've got. But I suppose the key thing, if you're looking to go, what do I want to look for? I would say it's a relatively rectangular site, because you can do a lot with central walkways, nice and wide open spaces, but then off each side you've got your surgery. I would say natural light as much as possible. Yeah. 2 sides to the clinic as a minimum if you can. Mm-hmm. You can get 3, unreal. Walking into a natural setting like a part of creation. Yep. And you just get that feeling like, that relaxation. Yeah. And there's nothing we can do about it. That's an innate thing in us, in our connection to nature. And it's the same with natural light. It's the same with finishes that connect us to nature. When you look at, okay, what's the ideal space? It's a space that you can actually maximize natural light. Yeah. And you can maximize that. What comes with natural light is that you can actually see out into nature. Yeah, fantastic. So from a client perspective, and I know the dentist I go to, they have wall-to-wall, floor-to-ceiling windows onto a running creek. Now, that's pretty amazing. That's beautiful. Yeah, and you're not going to get that everywhere. But I suppose my point is there's something about the patient journey when you can actually get them into as a relaxed state as possible from the moment they enter. So can we just talk about crafting the journey? Because I know, again, the psychology and the thinking that goes behind the design is really important. I wanted to ask you how you think about the patient journey, how you think about the user experience as you're designing that. You've got the well-being or the criteria there, those 10 criteria. Are you creating, what specifically is happening? Are you creating mood boards? Are you creating, what sort of practical things are you doing? As part of the design process, we almost couple, if you look at the human experience in a space, that's both your team and your patient. Yeah. And with all due respect, yes, your clients are your patients. But your team. Yeah, because without a team, and let's face it, it's probably one of the biggest tests or one of the biggest challenges of practice owners is how do you attract and retain top talent? Yep. And if you do attract and retain top talent, and I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but your patient journey, just by the team experience, the experience of having to do with your team, who are all invested and pumping and loving coming to work, that just flows through, doesn't it? Yeah. But I suppose when it comes to design and how that looks from design, and to answer your question, how do you actually see it come to life? So we use a combination of tools to help you as the practice owner visually see what it's going to be like from a patient perspective, but also from a team perspective. You've done practices yourself. You always get a 2D plan. I don't know about you, but a lot of practice owners find it very hard to visualize that in 3D, real life.
Yep.
How big is it? What's it going to look like? How's it going to feel? We use a 3D modeling program to actually 3D that, a program that you can actually walk through the space. So you can actually literally feel like you're in the space to look at, okay, how big is this waiting area? What's this waiting area feel like? What's the patient journey from here to the reception? Do I have a concierge style reception? Do we have admin separate? All that sort of stuff you can actually visually see. And I think that, again, that comes back to making educated decisions as a practice owner. Sometimes it might be your practice manager that you get on board for that as well, or your leadership team, to get their buy-in and their investment. But I think having those tools, along with things like mood boards, etc., make a massive difference for you as the practice owner to also make those decisions on how far you go with the money. Because I hate to keep bringing it up about budget, but it's a reality.
It is. And I think, I do want to actually talk to you a bit about budget in a moment, because I think it is an integral part of the whole design fit out process. We can't not talk about it. But just while we're on this topic of patient experience, team experience and so on, like when you get this right, and you've done lots of these things and you've seen them work really, really well. And I've been into some of your work, and it is like, it's beautiful. And it evokes a feeling, which I guess is where Evoke came
Excuse
from.
the pun.
Excuse the pun. Yeah, maybe I don't know if that's where the name came from, but it does evoke a feeling. And I wanted to ask you what that actually brings, what that means. We've spoken a bit about the team being happy and joyful about coming to work and the impact that has on the patients. What does that mean, though, for the business owner, the person who's buying or paying the bills, et cetera, et cetera? What's the big payoff?
The big payoff, I would say, can I step back slightly? Because another part of the design process, which I didn't cover off, is understanding your target market. At the end of the day, you can have the nicest practice in the world, but if your ideal patient or your ideal patient avatar doesn't feel at home in your space or comfortable in your space, and there's a disconnect between the feel of the practice and what they're paying potentially or what they're feeling like they should be, if there's not alignment, I think that's where you'll get disengagement from a patient perspective. And they'll either go, this is not for me, or these guys are just ripping us blind, depending on the socioeconomic target market. Where are you pitching? And I suppose that comes back to your bigger picture with your vision and understanding, because I know some people go, well, what do you mean target market? A practice owner might. And we go, well, who's the ideal patient that you want to attract through your door? And who's the ideal patient that you want to keep coming back to your practice? Yeah. And then we need to answer to that from a design perspective. And I think that whole environmental, emotional aspect really has to talk directly to that target market.
You're officially speaking my love language when you start getting into marketing, mate, because it is like, this is all part of your marketing strategy, right?
Yeah.
And I really love that you touched on this, because it's about beginning with the end in mind. Who is my ideal patient? Totally. Who's my target market? I'm always a bit of a believer in that when we're creating an environment that is obviously conducive to a great experience, but equally is conducive to great commerce as well.
Yep, absolutely. We're here to make money, correct? We're not doing this for love.
No, exactly.
It's got to be attract and retain the best patients, but it's got to be efficient. It's got to flow. It's got to bring in the dollars at the end of the day.
100%. So I wanted to ask you, like, if we're talking about, different scenarios for different markets and so on and so forth. I mean, most of the practice that I own is definitely geared towards a more affluent customer.
Higher end.
Definitely.
Yep.
And that's not everyone's circumstances, and that's okay. No. I totally get it, right? But I wanted to ask you about creating an environment that's conducive to buy.
Yep.
So let me just explain my thinking for a second, and this might be slightly tangential, but I hope it's useful. what I've always tried to do in our practice, I'll just use our practice as an example, and it doesn't mean it's the only way, but I'm just trying to use it because I can organise my thoughts that way. In our practice, we are a premium practice. We have a premium price structure. We have a pricing strategy, not just a fee level, not just a schedule of fees. Right? There's thought that goes into the experience. And so, for example, we will want to know where we're offering treatment, what that environment's like, where we're offering treatment, creating the perfect buying environment, down to the cups and saucers. And I'm on the record for saying we serve our tea and coffee in Wedgwood made by Vera Wang, right?
Yeah.
Because you don't need to say that you're offering a premium pricing when you're serving your tea and coffee in Wedgwood cups, right?
No, because it sends the message very loud and clear.
Totally. So I wanted to ask you about those little cues that we leave around the practice that you put in by design to create that buying environment. What do you guys add to that mix to create the perfect buying environment?
Yeah, so that you're speaking straight to the language of the design team, because at the end of the day, and that comes out of that target market.
Yeah.
What is going to impress that target market? For you, it's Wedgwood.
Yeah.
What is it that's going to attract? Like, let's take for the purpose of the conversation, let's take a practice in Western Sydney that's aimed at middle class families.
Yep.
What is going to be important, what we have to think then is what is important to busy mums with screaming kids.
Yes.
Okay, so that affects things like areas for children to play where let's face it, we're targeting it at the mother, right? Aren't we? Not the child.
Totally.
So the mother's paying. So who's paying here?
Yeah.
How do we make their journey as painless as possible?
Yeah.
Excuse the pun. I'm talking to a dentist.
That's okay.
Pain is something that you administer. I get that. No, I'm only joking.
It's all good, mate. It's all good.
But, pain-free as possible and that patient journey, what are the things that they're going to go, you know what, that just worked.
Yeah.
So for a mother with little kids, it's having a quiet space away from potentially the main waiting area because she doesn't want to interrupt everyone else. And she feels... Again, it comes back to feeling. What is the patient feeling? They feel like they're interrupting everyone. They're being a pain in the neck to everyone. So looking at the intricacies of that patient avatar, what is going to tick their boxes and smoke their tires? Yeah. But it really is individual to the target market.
But what I'm hearing is it's by design, not just...
100%.
Yeah, but this is the intention and the thinking behind it that I'm really loving, and this is why... This is all marketing to me. To me, this is all marketing.
Totally.
And I love it. And what I think that most people kind of forget is that their Fitout, beyond the colour scheme and the logo and the, blah, 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 it is absolutely part of your marketing strategy.
And we call it design strategy because it is strategic.
Yes.
Because anyone can give you walls, anyone can give you vinyl, anyone can install your chairs. Now, when I say anyone, there's lots of companies out there doing it. And I often have this question, well, what's the difference between you and these guys? And I go, well, our design team look at it holistically. We're about designing to create practice success, allow every practice owner to succeed. And we know that if we don't aim the design and the level of design and even when it comes to the layout, we talked about toy areas or whatever it is for your absolute ideal client, then you won't succeed the same. Mm-hmm. It just won't. There's so many aspects to it, but I think the main thing is that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it never will be.
Yeah. And I think that's a really big lesson for people listening to this podcast is your practice is unique, your desire is unique, your avatar is unique.
Absolutely.
Therefore, let's just think about it holistically and from an individual perspective.
Yeah, and just on that, Jesse, because it comes down to what you're offering, the services you offer, and the value adds you offer when it comes to, is it whitening, is it all those other things? And you're a dental coach, so you talk about this all the time, but if there's not alignment in the offering to the demographic and your location strategy, which we are very passionate about, don't just go and put your practice somewhere because that's where I live, that's where I've wanted to have a practice all my life. If the patient demographic doesn't align to your service offering and potentially to what you want to be perceived in the market, then there's a disconnect and you won't succeed.
Many years ago, I was giving a lecture and we're talking about the ideal patient avatar. It was exactly this. I was explaining the whole concept of it and alignment and all the rest of it, and he was sitting up the back and I could tell that he wasn't really into it. You know when you're talking to someone,
disengaged,
totally disengaged. The rest of the audience was in there, but he was not. And eventually he stuck his hand up and he said, "Hey Jesse, I just need to say I think that's a load of BS." And I went, "Oh, okay." First heckle for the day. I'm good. But no, I mean, but it was all right. And I said, "Okay, well, tell me why you think that, and let's talk about that." And he basically said, "Look, here's my ideal avatar." And their average income was about $250K. They drive European cars. Their kids go to private schools. They engage in luxury travel. And I'm going, okay. Now, he was in Melbourne, and my geography of Melbourne is not amazing. So I'll give a Sydney example for this. But he was describing essentially a Vaucluse patient.
Oh, wow. Okay, not even northern suburb. Yeah, okay.
Or someone who was really, really affluent, and yet his practice was in a low SES area. And
serious?
Yeah, and I said to him, so really you're expecting that affluent patient to leave their affluent suburb, drive half an hour across town through a decreasingly or an increasingly less affluent areas into yours. Do you understand the disconnect there? And eventually he did, but I think this is your point, and I'm using this story just to reinforce your point. Your location strategy has to match your avatar.
Has to, yep. And then your design and fit out has to match your avatar.
Yeah.
So if there's not alignment three ways, you're not going to get the ultimate result, put it that way.
We're in a bit of a pickle.
I noticed you said about, logos and colours, and I think that's another thing that people can tend to get wrong by just thinking we'll create the patient journey by shoving our logo everywhere, slapping up all our bright colours, our colour palette. It's not conducive to the ultimate patient experience. It might tell people when they're there who you are, but is that how they want to feel when they're in your... It doesn't mean that there has to be a connection between your brand and between the fit out and the design of the fit out and the look and feel and colours. But it can always be, and this is where designers really nail it, on muted tones that, we always say you should be able to walk into a practice and go, I'm at XYZ practice without looking at a logo on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, nice.
And that again comes back to that whole, what's our vision, what's our target market, what's our patient avatar. This is who we are. It's in our DNA, and that needs to be reflected in the physical space. Loving it.
Mate, I do want to ask you about budget because we've spoken about that a few times. And I guess the difficulty in all of this is, for a lot of people embarking on these kind of projects, they don't know what's reasonable and what's not, right? And, we could put a flag in the ground and say, well, it's X dollars per square metre for a modest fit out, a medium fit out, or a premium fit out.
Yeah.
But I realise that that's a bit artificial.
Yeah, and very high level. And it might give an indication, like, okay, so we're setting a realistic range. But with all due respect, you can't. If someone gives you a per square metre rate, hand on heart, they're either fluffing it or they're going to slap you with big variations at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, the only way to get a true valuation is to do, a high-level budget based on the actual
design.
Yeah, and based on the actual space. So every space comes with its, particular challenges, and that's why even going, okay, it's a cold shell or a warm shell, and I can explain. A cold shell is basically something with just a concrete floor, bare walls, no ceiling, no aircon, no nothing.
Yeah.
A warm shell is you might have carpet on the floor. You get the tenancy with carpet on the floor, linings on the outside, and a ceiling, and just for an open office with lighting and aircon. So you can sort of go, okay, we can give you a range for that or a range for that. But until you've actually looked at the property and looked at the intricacies of it, you can't give an accurate guide.
Yeah.
accurate. I suppose that's the emphasis. You can give a ballpark and a range. You might go, well, look, it's between $2,000 and $2,500 or dollars per square metre, but it really comes down to site by site. And if someone will give you a fixed range, fixed price on that, it's not safe.
Yeah.
Definitely not safe.
So how do you create safety in your budget?
Yep. So the way our process works, which is probably a little bit different to a lot, we'll have a high-level conversation around budget because, again, it's more when it comes to the finishes. The designer needs to know what's a realistic dollar spend, if you like, overall. You might come to us and go, look, I've got 300 square metres. And if someone says, I've only got 100K, well, look, we really can't help you. And I think you need to talk to the bank, or you need to be realistic about your business plan because it's not going to cut it.
Yeah.
But if it's a more realistic on the money area of budget, sometimes in that initial call, the initial discussion, the designer might say, look, have you got a budget in mind? If they don't, no, that's fine. Our next step is we do a space plan. We see what we can fit in the space. And this is in due diligence phase. So this should be before they've signed anything.
Great.
We do a space plan. Make sure that it's going to work on the numbers of surgeries to get your revenue generating spaces right, that it's going to feed back into Jesse's plan to go, yep, cool, we can make that work. Within 5 years, you're here or there or whatever. And then we do a high-level budget based on a site review. So we look at the site, we check what's there. It's still not trades to site, but it's a much more accurate indication. And it's at that point we present the design with 3Ds, with a budget. And at that point, it gives enough information for the practice owner to go talk to the bank, talk to their business coach, go, is this going to work for me? Are we ready to jump? Yes, I can get it approved here. Yes, I've got enough parking, or we can get enough parking. What are the implications? And so you're not flying blind.
Yeah.
At that point, if you go, yep, we're going to push ahead with this property, that's when Evoke requires a heads of agreement. And at that point, we're basically going, yes, we are partnering, but it's not a final contract because there's so much to be ironed out. There's a full documentation set to be done, fully deep dive into what level of finish. And sometimes we'll work with clients when they go, look, I want a stone look, but I just can't afford it. And we go, look, you can't afford it. You need to put the money there or whatever.
Yeah.
And we try and, it's almost like you think of shopping for your car. So you have a base price.
Yes.
And you option up, I want bigger wheels, I want tinting, I want carpet mats, I want this, that, the other. So there's always a minimum of this is the basics of what you need to get set up and operate.
Yeah.
These are the nice to haves that you can add on to your vehicle. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So I guess what I'm hearing is that, with this baseline, you're basically saying, hey, if you've got this amount of money to spend, these are the priority areas to spend it.
Yep.
So
absolutely
allocate your resources here. Yep. And then if there's more money in the pot, this is what you could do to really
to take it from a painted wall to a feature wall, or take that from a loose furniture in your waiting to a beautiful joinery piece that's with banquet seating, etc. Just examples like that.
Yeah.
But again, it puts you as the practice owner in the driver's seat to decide where you want to spend the money, rather than a design company just going, this is what you should have, lump sum, take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Just trust us. Which, people do put a lot of trust in us. They're spending a lot of money.
You said the word, or you uttered the word that every practice owner dreads, and that is variations. And
can I say one thing? We dread variations too.
Yeah.
Unless it has to be driven by the client. Otherwise, questions often come up on our sites. And if we've missed something, I go, well, we can't expect the practice owner to put their hand, for us to put our hand out and them to have to pay for something. It's like saying, oh, sorry, did you want vinyl in that room? Of course they want a vinyl. I'm just using that as a silly example, but if it's an expectation that it was included, we have to stand by it. That's our stuff up, and that's our learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we probably differ, and that's probably just due to our culture, is that our whole aim from the outset is that every practice owner that we work with becomes a raving fan.
Yeah.
And the sting in the tail of variations is horrible for us giving them and horrible for you as the practice owner receiving them. No one wants them.
No one wins.
And it's not sustainable. In my book, it's not sustainable business. It's very different if you come in and go, look, Jerry, or look, designer, I've decided I really do want to up spec to that other thing, or I want to change this. I'm not happy with that. How much extra was it again? All right, yep, fine. Here, I'll sign there.
Yeah,
that's different. That's driven by you as the client to go, I want something different.
Yes.
Yeah. But so often I hear of horror stories where, with all due respect, a practice owner probably hasn't read the fine print. And I say this to the team all the time. We can't expect our clients to be the experts at this. We need to make sure they're clear on what's included, what's not included. We can't go back to them later and go, hey, that's not included. It wasn't in the exclusions, but it wasn't included. Like, it's an expectation.
Yeah, it's a grey area. And I think you touched on something interesting about people reading fine print. I think in everyone's busyness that people are probably not reading some of these things as clearly or as carefully as they might. And so, again, I would encourage everyone, no matter whether you're dealing with any vendor, whether it's fit out companies or anything else, always read the contract, right?
Yeah, read it. And if you've got a question, ask. Put your hand up.
Yeah. Jerry, obviously staying on budget is important, getting clear about the budget, staying to the budget. But what about timeframes? Because again, working to a particular timeframe, people might be moving away from a place of employment into this new practice that they're starting, or there's timelines that are sensitive and so on and so forth. How do you manage that with a degree of precision and predictability?
Yeah. So the way, I don't know how others do it, but I do hear by the grapevine that people seem to like the way we do it. A lot of companies, I think, when you talk about a project schedule for a construction project, generally speaking, that starts from when you sign your contract to when you finish on site. And here's your keys, hand it over, here's your manuals, documents, everything else. Good luck with it. That is what we used to do. I think, without giving too much away about the Evoke experience, I think that's probably one of our point of differences in that from the very outset, from the very first phone call, and from when we first set up a design discovery with you as a practice owner, we actually create a timeline, like a project schedule, including the design and sales process, so that right from the outset, not just when you're on site, this is what we need by when, these are the decisions that we need from you as the practice owner. Because you've got to remember, I don't know, you've done a couple of fit outs, but it might be 10 years since you've done a fit out. So even if you've done fit outs before, you're a bit rusty. Yeah. A bit rusty on what am I needed? I'm busy running a practice. So the thing we're very, very passionate about is making sure that you as a practice owner are very clear. This is our process, and this is when we need things by, and this is when we need, and in some ways that's a commitment from us to go, we need 3 weeks for this design stage, but we also need information from you before we can hit that. So if that milestone moves,
everything moves.
Yeah. And I think part of that is because you might tell me, hey, we have to be in by Christmas because my rent's up in the other place. We've got to be out of there. Otherwise, it's going to be costing you money.
Yep.
Right. We work back from that. Is this realistic? If it's not realistic, we'll have the discussion at the very outset when we do the timeline and go, look, sorry, Jesse, this is what it's looking like. Can you negotiate with your current landlord to extend it a month or go on a month by month? Happy days, but this is what we're going to need from you by when, and these are the decisions that we have to make in order to hit that mark. And everyone's really clear that if we don't have a decision, or we don't have an equipment list, or we don't have the things that we need from you, deliverables, if we don't hit that mark, then it will push back. Now, and it also keeps our team accountable to do what we say we'll do.
Yeah.
And get you in when you need to be in.
But I really like that, mate, because if I'm working in that environment, I go, okay, I'm a fairly methodical, systematic thinker. I love timelines. I like to know what's due when. And so I really like that. If you give me a list of things that I need to do and say, Jesse, you need to have this to me by the end of the month or by whatever date, I've got a checklist. I can go, well, I've done this, and this. Great. Jerry, here's what I've given you. Please just check that. Have I missed anything? Blah,
anything
blah, blah, blah.
you're still waiting on? Yeah, 100%.
all of that, and then you go, no, mate, we're good to go. And then your 3 weeks or whatever the next phase of that project is rolls on, and everyone's winning.
And even when it comes to the meetings that we're going to need you at in order to, whether it's design progress, they're on the timeline. So it's right early on. The appointment mightn't be set all the time or the date exact, but you'll know what week it is.
Yeah, and that's great, because then I can go, great, well, Jerry, Wednesday is a good day for me because I'm patient-free that day, or whatever it is, right?
And then our team work around that, and that's a common thread.
Yeah.
Because, you guys will have one day off that you do all your admin, or a half day, or whatever it is. So we know that, okay, we've got till this time next Wednesday.
Yeah.
To have it ready for Jesse to review, and
Yeah, fantastic. So, Jerry, we've covered a lot of material today. We've spoken a lot about the thinking and the strategy that goes into the space. We spoke about actually, thinking about this before you sign the documentation to move into a space, to buy a space, whatever it is. Yep. We spoke about some of the thinking and psychology that goes into creating the experience, whether that's the experience for the team or for the patients. We spoke about, why it's so important to get that right, because it's all part of marketing. And then we've gone through some of the practicalities around budget and times and all the rest of it. If you were to leave our audience with one or two pearls of wisdom, or the things that you wished every practice owner knew as they're going through this process, what would be, I guess, the gospel according to Jerry, if you wanted to leave people with just a couple of pearls of wisdom or a couple of things to consider as they go about their process?
Okay, I would say if you're looking to start a practice, or you're looking to expand into another practice or relocate to another practice, you can't talk to people early enough in the process. And when I say talk to people, I mean talk to your business coach, talk to your marketing coach, talk to your property experts, talk to your fit out company, even before you've got a location. And you go, that just seems insane. And I get, there's often people go, oh, why would we waste all that time? Same with your finance, because often this question comes up often, Jesse, and they go, well, who should we talk to first? Well, actually, sorry, you've got to talk to everyone because it all intertwines, Having that discussion with your finance and your accountant and your lawyer, it's all got to happen.
Yeah.
And knowledge is power. That's all I'd say. So the more discussions you have with your experts and the experts that you've got in your corner, and make sure you've got trusted experts in all those things we've talked about, whether it be business coach for business planning, whether it be marketing for marketing strategy and knowing your patient avatar. We're not here to just design and build fit outs.
Yeah.
We're here to set practice owners up for success. And by that, I mean making sure you've got the right people in your corner to help you do that from day one.
Mate, that is a beautiful summary, and I'm not even going to add anything to that because you've just tied it into a beautiful bow. And I just want to say thank you, mate, for not just sharing your insights around the process, but I love your philosophy, and I love the fact that you are thinking about this holistically. And I love the ethos of setting practice owners up for success. And I think that is a really, really important thing. And you guys do that supremely well. So,
well, thank you, Jesse. We're striving to be the best at what we can be. I wouldn't say we've made it, and I don't know if we ever will. But we're doing our best to get there.
Mate, I think you're being a bit hard on yourself, mate. You do it really well. There's always room for every one of us to do things better, and I get that. That's part of life, right? But you guys, you nail a lot of stuff really well, mate. So,
well, with the help of our friends, thank you, Jesse, and you being one of them.
No worries. All right, well, you take good care, mate, and
excellent.
We'll catch up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast. For more episodes, go to drjessiegreen.com/savvydentist. And to discover how to build a high-performance dental practice, visit drjessiegreen.com and download the free report.